Hey, how's it going, friends? Thank you for tuning in to VR Revelations. Welcome to the channel. Please make sure you give this video a like and make sure you subscribe for future coverage. Also, if you want to support the channel, check out the links below. So let's jump right into it. It is April 21st, the year of our Lord 2023. And as you can see by the headline of this title here from The Guardian, NATO is at it again with their pursuit in trying to get Ukraine to become a member of the alliance. Now, remember, whether you want to believe it or not, Russia clearly stated that this was the main reason why they felt they were forced to invade Ukraine, right? That's because NATO was trying to make Ukraine part of the alliance, which would give NATO the right to enter into Ukraine, establish military bases, and even deploy nuclear missiles, which could reach Moscow within seconds, if not, at the most 1 or 2 minutes, right? So this is a existential threat for Russia, much in the same way that it would be for the United States if Russia were to do the same thing in Mexico or Canada, right? The US would be forced to invade those countries, and I believe they would do it a lot more effectively than Russia might be doing it right now. Of course, the US would never tolerate Russia in Mexico or Canada, even if those governments agreed to do so. The U.S. would absolutely not respect the sovereignty of those nations due to the, perceived danger or existential threat. You don't want to have, nuclear missiles that belong to your enemy right outside of your house. And so, the West tries to ignore this point, this very real reason why they pushed Russia's hand into acting in such a way. Again, Vladimir Putin has been warning about this for years, and the U.S., being the big dog that it is or was on the world stage, ignored those warnings, and they decided to try and encroach Russia. And so the whole situation has completely fired for the US and for NATO. And we see that Ukraine is obviously losing on the battlefield. Speculate all you want about the numbers and all of this. What we can all clearly agree on is that Russia has been taking territory, and they're close to achieving their special military goals. One of those big victories has been Bakhmut and Soledar, right? Zelensky made a huge deal about Bakhmut. That's pretty much done with. It was absolutely catastrophic for Ukraine. We just saw these government leaks that were leaked online by this young man who apparently leaked them on a video game application, chatting application, Discord. And, we learned what we already knew, except this time it's supposedly coming from the government themselves. And that's the analysis that Ukraine is losing the war. They have ran out of munitions. The loss of soldiers is far greater than what Russia has suffered. And, it's a very pessimistic outlook on the situation for Ukraine. And, of course, a lot of people speculate that the U.S. released this information on purpose in order to foreshadow what will be a eventual abandonment of Ukraine. But, they're not going to say that on the mainstream media. And so, as we're about to read here, General Stoltenberg here, or Secretary General from NATO, traveled to Germany I believe. And so they had a meeting with over 50 countries, essentially declaring what, they have been declaring all along, that they are going to continue to support Ukraine. But I'm sure this is, infuriating the Russian leadership, since, this is the reason why they chose to invade. And even after all the destruction, having these people coming out and instigating the situation even more with the same rhetoric, I'm sure it's got to have the Russians thinking these people just don't learn, right? They're not going to stop until we completely destroy Ukraine. So they will probably have to do that. But anyways, let's go ahead and jump into the article here. It says the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has said all member countries have agreed that Ukraine will eventually join the transatlantic military alliance once the war is over. Ahead of a meeting of Western defense ministers discussing further military aid for Kyiv, further announcements on weapons and support are expected after the summit at the Ramstein Air Base in Germany, but Stoltenberg also sounded notably upbeat about Ukraine's longer-term prospects for joining NATO. Again, Ukraine is never joining NATO, especially not now that they are directly involved in a war against Russia, who is a superpower, right? A nuclear superpower. And even if, let's say, NATO was to declare with the support of all the countries right now that Ukraine is a part of NATO, the thing is that one of the main clauses, right, of the NATO alliance, or one of the main agreements, is that if one country is attacked, then it's like all countries being attacked, right? If one country is attacked, in this case Ukraine, if it were to become part of NATO, it would give the rest of the countries of the alliance the right to join in the war and defend that one country. So you can imagine if they were to make Ukraine part of NATO right now, that means the US and all these other countries that are part of NATO could declare war on Russia. And we're talking about the end of the world here, right? Okay, that would be World War III on like max level. But of course that's not going to happen. And even if they were to declare right now Ukraine part of NATO, that's not going to stop Russia. Russia's just going to ignore that. Of course, they have the backing of China. And so if Ukraine does become part of NATO in the future, it's probably going to be under Russian authority. So that would be like Russia joining NATO. So that would be something to see, wouldn't it? So it goes on here. Further announcements on weapons and support are expected after the summit at the Ramstein Air Base in Germany. Let's skip ahead. I just read that. All NATO allies have agreed that Ukraine will become a member. Well, they can agree as much as they want. Doesn't make it true, he said. President Zelensky has a very clear expectation. We discuss this. Both the issue of membership, but also security guarantees. And of course, Ukraine needs security because no one can tell when and how this war ends. No, not true. It's going to end with Russia victorious, just as they are currently winning. And Ukraine is going to lose half its territory, if not all of it. And the U.S. and all the NATO alliance are going to come out looking weak and will be weak, and Russia will look like the new vanguard of the world. But what we do now is that when the war ends, we need to ensure that history doesn't repeat itself. NATO membership, carrying with it a commitment from all member countries to protect each other if attacked, has long been a demand from Kyiv. Although NATO agreed in principle in 2008 that Ukraine could be allowed to join, the country has never been given a formal pathway to membership. The outbreak of fighting with Russia, which dates back to 2014, has also acted as a further deterrent to NATO members because immediate membership for Ukraine would entail an immediate conflict with a nuclear-armed Moscow, which the U.S. and other member states have made clear they will not contemplate. Now, as I've covered in previous videos, Russia's completely aware, and they've made public statements saying that this war was never against Ukraine or the Ukrainian people. It's actually against the powers of NATO, the U.S., and all these Western countries that are seeding chaos in these parts of the world where Russia has influence in order to try and convert those countries to serve the interest of the U.S., right? And so they're very aware that this war is really a proxy war against NATO and against the U.S. and England. Now, the Western world likes to act dumb, right? They pretend to not understand that idea, but they're literally the ones that, came up with it. And so, Russia is never going to allow Ukraine to become part of NATO, right? That would be an even worse outcome than what originally NATO was seeking which was to have Ukraine, become part of NATO before the war. I mean, if Russia were to allow that after the conflict already started, it would be even worse. And so that's why I say they are never going to allow it. But the U.S. and them, they're not serious about this. They know this means World War III, right? If they declared Ukraine part of NATO while it's in a state of war, then we're talking about World War III. And, Russia has its allies right behind it in that scenario. And really, Russia doesn't even need allies in such a scenario. They can literally destroy the world with their nuclear arsenal, right? Nobody wins. Everybody dead. But I don't think that's going to happen, no matter how many statements Stoltenberg makes out here. And so, let's read a little bit more here. Zelensky is scheduled to attend NATO's next annual summit in Vilnius, Lithuania in July, but Ukrainian officials have said they want the alliance to agree on a roadmap to membership as a condition for his attendance. Kyiv applied for an accelerated membership last September. Stoltenberg traveled to Kyiv on Thursday, the first time the NATO chief had visited the country since the start of the all-out war, where he said the alliance must ensure Ukraine prevails in the fighting. His fresh remarks indicate a willingness to edge forward Ukraine's case for joining. But one key member cautioned against any rapid development. The German defense minister Boris Pistorius said in a Thursday night interview on German television, the doors is open a crack, but this is not the time to decide now. So when will they decide? When Ukraine is completely done for? When there is nothing to fight for, at least according to them? You have to understand, the only reason as bravely and as formidably that the Ukrainian people have fought, because it's their duty to defend their country, the only reason they are still in this fight and the only reason they will continue to stay in the fight is because of NATO, because of all of these supplies they've been receiving from these Western countries, these European countries, right? So again, that just confirms Russia's statement that they are in a war against NATO, against the United States. And anything less than a victory for Russia would be absolutely catastrophic. And they are absolutely willing to use nuclear weapons. Putin has referenced this, right? The use of nuclear bombs, and he hasn't come out and outright said it, but most of the people around them have said it and have even suggested that they should nuke and destroy places like Germany and all these other countries that are helping Ukraine and that are trying to encircle Russia. And so I don't think it will get to that point. Again, NATO must be dumber than I thought if they think now, if they think it's they should wait even more in order to support Ukraine in a serious way. If you were going to have Ukraine become a member of NATO, the time was before the war, right? Before conflict. If you were going to supply them with enough weapons to launch a counteroffensive that could make Russia stop its offensive, it would have been right at the beginning of the war when Ukraine was at full strength. Right now, they are completely weakened, and as a matter of fact, Ukraine itself is dead, but is only being transferred blood through NATO and these other nations that are keeping it alive. And so I believe we're going to see Ukraine and his officers around him grow more desperate in trying to gain membership. I think that they think they will join NATO. I think they probably feel like they've proven themselves and how serious they are and what price they are willing to pay to join this alliance. But I think that the U.S. knows this would spell out World War III, and that's just according to the NATO agreements, right? If one country is attacked, then all other countries can join in the war. So I just don't see Ukraine becoming part of NATO. That would literally mean, Russia versus NATO. And if other countries get involved, Russia is absolutely using nuclear weapons. And other countries would join on Russia's side. And then we would have a world-ending event, a nuclear holocaust, which, again, as I stated before, I believe it's absolutely coming to the world. And that's just because the Bible prophesied that the world would be destroyed once and for all by fire, as opposed to water in the times of Noah. But I don't think it's going to happen over Ukraine, much like I don't think that it's going to happen over Taiwan. But yeah, guys, you have NATO here. They know it's over. I guess they must be trying to lift Zelensky's spirit to try and keep this going as long as it takes. But yeah, I think that Ukraine will never be a part of NATO. Anyways, that's going to be it for this video. Remember, the truth is stranger than fiction. Have a wonderful day, and God bless.